welcome to Lost in Movies. I'm Alec Kerr, the film critic for the Conway Daily Sun, and once again I'm joined by my colleague
Erik Eisele from the Conway Daily Sun. Thanks for having me, Alec.
Yeah. And this week we're talking about 9/11 movies and movies about Iraq, since obviously Sunday is September 11th and it's the 10 years since. It's kind of unbelievable to think that 10 years have passed. So thought we'd look back on some movies that were centered around September 11th, and then some movies that were about Iraq.
And that's, you know, we at the newspaper, we're also doing the same thing. We're doing a special 9/11 issue, and if you're watching television or listening to the radio at all, I mean, the coverage of 10 years after is all over the place. So this kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and so there were two major movies that were released 5 years ago. There was World Trade Center and United 93. I
watched both of them this weekend, and really, like, the picture that they give is they kind of outline the confusion of what happened that day, and it's hard to, you know, for people who, I wasn't in New York and who weren't there, really, you don't have any idea of what that situation was like, and you see, and these are just brief kind of vignettes of that, but you have no idea what's going on for most of the movie in United 93.
Right. United 93 is really interesting in that it's very confined. I mean, it does expand out, but, you know, so it's not all on the plane, but it's in the air traffic controller tower. You know, it's not out on the streets. It's very much in these specific locations.
And United 93 was the one plane that went down in the field in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Like you know, September 11th was World Trade Center. Both towers got hit. The Pentagon got hit, and then this plane went down in the field, and it went down when the passengers overpowered the terrorists.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, most of the time you don't even think of United 93.
Right, and it really is a story of like true heroism.
And when you watch it, it's shot in this was what I thought was so interesting. I don't think there was a tripod in the entire movie. There was no stable shot. So as everything's, you know, you see what's happening in the air traffic control center, and you know, the handheld camera going, it feels like you're there.
Right.
It really feels like you're watching this unfold at the same time they do.
Right. And it was done in real time. So that span of the film is the span of like the actual timeline that all occurred in. Yeah.
Huh.
And Paul Greengrass is the director.
Also the writer.
Yes. And he also did a movie called Green Zone a couple years ago that explored Iraq and if the weapons of mass destruction were there. And it was kind of, Matt Damon was the one skeptical guy in the entire country. So he kind of represented us. You know, he's the one person that didn't think, I'm not going to follow protocol, this can't be right, but whatever. But Paul Greengrass, his style really is that whole handheld shaky cam thing, and he went on and did the second two Bourne movies, and he kind of redefined how action is shot. Now it's all that shaky cam stuff, and it doesn't work all the time.
Right.
It works really well in United 93 because it puts you in the moment.
Well.
And it works well in the Bourne movies because it is so focused on one person. But when you have like that style
just, across the field,
right? When you have it with like Transformers, you have that shaky cam thing. It just starts getting nauseating.
Well, you know that, and the interesting thing about United 93 is you've got this. You know, we all knew the story, and you see a plane just. They're in the air traffic control center, and plane goes off course, and there was some garbled language coming over the radio, and then there's no contact after that.
Yeah.
And like, you get this sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Right.
But you totally understand where they are.
Yeah.
In a way that I don't think, you know, you get in news coverage after the fact or that sort of thing. It really.
And it's an interesting thing for the viewer in that we know things that people in the movie don't. So when things start going awry, it's really suspenseful for us and they are still kind of catching up to where we are. And you know, I was reading on IMDb and Netflix comments, which is always a bad idea. And there's so many people who are just like, oh, it's so boring, like nothing's happening, and why was it in the air traffic controller tower? Stuff was where it should have been on the airplane the entire time. And it's just like, well, there's something about that confusion and things slowly coming out, and like they're like, oh, there's a missing plane, and oh, something just hit the tower. Was it that missing plane? We don't know. And then they think it was that plane, but it wasn't that plane. And
right. Yeah, it literally. I mean, it is just utter chaos when you're watching these people in the control center. Like they're at the air traffic control center in Boston, then the other one I think is in New York, and then they're in the tower in New York, and then they're in the plane, and like that's it. There's only like 4 places in the military base. Right,
and the center is actually I think in like Ohio. Yeah, it's not even like anywhere near there, so they're really detached from it.
And you just get this. You get this feeling of what it was like that day. What I guess it really gets across is that was the day before September 11th. Right. Like there was no fear of of planes being used as weapons.
Right.
And there's no concept of it. Whereas now, just to us, if a plane gets hijacked, we're thinking someone's gonna use it to hit the White House. They're thinking, okay, what's the ransom? And it's funny in the start of it, they're like, we haven't had a hijacking since in the last 40 years. Like this can't really be a hijacking.
Right. And they're kind of just laughing about it, like, oh, it's a hijacking. We'll get them down, whatever.
Yeah, it totally. In a lot of ways, it kind of it exemplifies the pre-9/11 era and the post-9/11 era, where early in the movie, a hijacking is something just unimaginable. By the end of or partway in, you see a military commander talking about scrambling jets, and the F-16s don't have any armaments. And he's like, okay, well, we'll ram them and eject if that's what what it comes to. And you're just like, my God, this is like the transformation over that hour period of. I think that's emblematic of the transformation pre-September 11th, post-September 11th.
Like they show them going through security at the beginning of United 93, and it's so easy, and you're just like, wow.
No shoes came off.
Yeah, how easy it used to be.
Water bottles going through, and you see the guys. The terrorists have knives and a fake bomb made out of like clay and battery, clay and a 6-volt battery, and he assembles them in the lavatory, and it's just. I mean, it's just such a different world than none of that would be possible now. But it really kind of sheds a light on it that I think most people who watched it on television.
Right, and. One thing I appreciated was that the hijackers were portrayed in not so much a sympathetic light, but they weren't humanistic. Yeah, they weren't made out to be monsters.
Totally.
The leader of it, well, not the leader, the guy that became the pilot. You see him really struggling a lot, and they make it very clear that this is faith-based, misguided, but faith-based.
And yeah, I mean, the problems that, or as they interpret it, his kind of challenge of deciding to do this act is part of what gets them far enough away from Washington, D.C. so that they take a while to turn around, which gives the passengers time to kind of figure out that this is going to be an attack and we need to do something.
Right.
And you really see the struggle within the group and within the individuals, which I agree. I thought that was really, really interesting.
And like he kept saying, oh, we need to wait for the right time. And for me, I was like, that right time was he was watching everybody eat their meal. Right. I was just like, you can't do this to somebody when they're having a meal. Like.
Yeah, and the same thing, one of the hijackers stabbed the guy early on, and then they let a stewardess provide first aid. And, you're sitting there knowing what this plane is going to.
Right.
And you're like, first aid? Like, every one of these people are going to be incinerated as you crash into the White House. So he put the little picture of the White House. It was such a, you see the humanism of these people.
And I thought there was an interesting moment where everybody on the plane, hijackers, passengers, they're all praying to their God. And I thought that was very interesting, just to have that point that, yes, these people are extremists and they're misguided, but they're really not that different than everybody else.
Yeah, and in the end, you know, it's one side versus the other. The passengers revolt, and you know, and we all know the story kind of peripherally. They revolt and the plane winds up crashing, but that last scene where it crashes,
it's very difficult.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's just it's a fantastic movie. Out of everything that I watched, by far I thought that was the one that everyone should see.
Yeah, and the realism and authenticity really comes from the fact that many of the people that were in the tower, many people in the military base were actual people.
Right.
They actually had a real pilot. They actually had real flight attendants. Obviously not the ones on the actual flight, but the main guy, the head chief of the tower, that was actually him. The guy that says, you know, we're stopping everything, that was the real guy.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and you have a lot of kind of respect for him when you're watching the movie, because he says, we've had planes hit towers, ground them all.
Right.
And everyone's
we're
like,
going to lose billions of dollars. It doesn't
I don't
matter.
care. Just
doesn't matter. And that is just as heroic as moment as anything they did on that flight. Just to know, be like, no, money has nothing to do with it. We got to stop this now.
Yep. And you were mentioning that, I don't know if it was the director, but someone really sat down and talked with the family members.
Yeah, if you get the actual DVD and don't watch it, you know, online, there's a documentary where they talked to all of the families, and the families were directly involved with the making of that film. They got like minute details about everybody on that flight, from what they were wearing, what they liked to eat, the music they listened to. And
it comes across. And you know, one of the other things that you were mentioning, which I thought that was not. I would highly recommend that to anyone who wants to watch a movie. You know, not an uplifting movie, but a movie on a Saturday. It is a fantastic movie, but it didn't do that well.
Didn't do that well. I think because it came out only 5 years after. I don't know if it came out this year, if it would have done any better. I'm not sure people are really ready to watch it. I avoided it until deciding to do this episode, just because I didn't know if I could watch it, if I wanted to watch it. And United 93 is definitely, between United 93 and World Trade Center, the two films that are directly about it, it is the better film. There's also a film called Flight 93 that was made for A&E, TV movie.
Don't mistake the two.
Don't mistake the two. Like, I know there are some people that very vocally say it's the better film. I didn't watch it. It sounded too much like movie of the week tragedy, and I just didn't want to do that.
Well, and